On October 14, 1943, an altitude of 25,000 feet, Staff Sergeant Michael Romano is a solitary sentinel in the tail of his B-17. Encased in a cramped plexiglass coffin, his hands clench the grips of twin .50 caliber machine guns, a weapon system heavier than the man tasked with wielding it. Through the narrow window, he watches a Focke-Wulf 190 maneuver into position for an attack run from 6 o'clock low, the bomber's most vulnerable angle. Romano squints through his ring and bead sight, a primitive aiming system offering no compensation for velocity, no calculation for critical deflection needed to hit a target. With both aircraft hurtling through the thin, cold air at a combined speed exceeding 500 miles per hour, the task is less a science of gunnery and more a desperate act of intuition. He fires. Tracers arc harmlessly behind the diving fighter. The FW-190's cannons answer with devastating effect, its 20-millimeter shell shredding aluminum skin like tissue paper. This fleeting, violent exchange is a microcosm of a larger catastrophe unfolding across the skies of the Reich. This is the second Schweinfurt raid, a mission that dispatched 291 B-17 flying fortresses deep into Germany without fighter escort. By nightfall, the results are catastrophic. 60 bombers are shot down, representing over 20% of the force. Another 138 return, so damaged they will never fly again. 600 American airmen are lost. The mathematics are brutal and unsustainable. At this rate of attrition, no bomber crew could statistically survive its required 25 missions. Post-mission analysis reveals the grim truth. Tail gunners, the bomber's last line of defense, achieve hit rates below 8%. Luftwaffe fighter pilots need only endure a few seconds of inaccurate return fire to methodically dismantle America's billion-dollar strategic bombing campaign, one fortress at a time. At 8th Air Force Headquarters in High Wycombe, England, senior commanders confront a catastrophic failure. The B-17's defensive philosophy, a concept borrowed from naval warfare that envisioned the bombers as self-defending flying fortresses, has been shattered. Without a solution, the entire doctrine of daylight precision bombing faces cancellation. But unknown to them, at that very moment on a cold hard stand at Bassingbourn Airfield, a 22-year-old tail gunner with barely a high school education is sketching a design in his logbook. It is an idea that violates multiple Army Air Forces regulations, a design that weapons engineers will soon dismiss as mechanically impossible. It is a design that will ultimately triple tail gun accuracy and save thousands of American lives. This is the story of the gunner who refused to stop and the innovation they tried to ban. For the young airmen of the 8th Air Force, the reality of aerial combat proved brutally different from any expectation. In August 1943, Staff Sergeant Michael Romano, a former factory worker from Pittsburgh, arrived at Bassingbourn Airfield in England as a replacement tail gunner for the 91st Bomb Group. Barely 19 when he enlisted. With no college degree or engineering background, his training consisted of a mere 6 weeks learning to clear jams and estimate range. His assigned station was a chillingly isolated space, barely larger than a coffin. Here, he would kneel on a bicycle seat, bracing his feet against the aircraft structure while wrestling 2.50 caliber Browning M2 machine guns on a simple yoke mount. His aiming system was a primitive ring and bead sight, forcing him to calculate a diving fighter's speed, deflection angle, and bullet drop in seconds, all while wearing bulky gloves and temperatures plummeting to 40 degrees below zero. The grim futility of this task was borne out by statistics. Even expert gunners under controlled, peacetime conditions rarely exceeded a 12% hit rate. In the stress and oxygen-deprived chaos of combat, that figure plummeted to between 6 and 8%. The Luftwaffe recognized this vulnerability immediately. Throughout 1943, German fighter tactics evolved to exploit it, attacking from a bomber's 6 o'clock position. Pilots would endure 15 to 20 seconds of inaccurate tail gun fire to close within 200 yards, where their 20mm cannons could unleash devastating strikes. Luftwaffe after-action reports dismissed the B-17's tail position as marginally dangerous, its accuracy insufficient to deter a determined attack. The consequences were catastrophic. The raid on Schweinfurt on August 17, 1943, cost 60 bombers. A mission to Bremen on October 8 saw 30 more lost. followed by another 30 over Munster 2 days later. The 8th Air Force was hemorrhaging aircraft and crews faster than American factories could replace them. In Washington, a deeply concerned General Henry Hap Arnold, commanding general of the Army Air Forces, began to question whether the entire strategy of daylight bombing was viable. While engineers at Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center worked on an improved powered tail turret, its development timeline stretched deep into 1944. Retrofitting existing bombers was a months-long factory overhaul, impossible to implement for the fleet already in England. As the High Command debated, men continued to die. On August 19, 1943, Michael Romano flew his first mission against Gilsrijen Airfield in the Netherlands. He fired 480 rounds at 3 attacking FW-190s, convinced he had score hits. Later, gun camera footage revealed the cold truth. Every tracer had passed harmlessly behind its target. The tremors of the mission lingered long after the engines fell silent. Following his third sortie, Staff Sergeant Michael Romano remained on a hard stand, staring at the twin barrels of his .50 caliber machine guns. His hands shook, not with fear, but with profound physical exhaustion of wrestling the 84-pound weapons from a kneeling position deep in the freezing stratosphere. That night, an idea began to form. The deficiency, he reasoned, wasn't the gun itself, but the primitive way a gunner had to use it. Tail gunners were firing blind, chasing fleeting targets with no way to accurately predict their trajectory. What he needed was what the Army Air Forces had not provided, a reflector sight. But the cramped tail turret made such an installation impossible by the book. Romano was uniquely unqualified for the task. Born in Pittsburgh in 1924, he had dropped out of high school at 16 to work in the steel mills, learning practical metallurgy not from textbooks, but from the brutal trial and error of blast furnaces and machinery repair. He enlisted to escape the factory, but the military saw only his small stature. At 5'7" and 145 pounds, he was assigned to aerial gunnery school simply because he could fit into the B-17's tight tail position. His performance at Harlingen, Texas, was unremarkable. Instructors noted his trigger discipline was merely adequate. No one identified him as exceptional, but Romano possessed a trait unmeasured by training manuals, an intolerance for systems that failed. On October 4, 1943, during a mission to Frankfurt, that intolerance reached its breaking point. His bomber limped home, riddled with 78 flak holes and savaged by 2 fighter attacks. Romano had fired 620 rounds and hit nothing. Worse, he had watched helplessly as a Bf-109 destroyed a neighboring B-17, killing his best friend in the tail, his own counterfire proving utterly ineffective. That night, flashlight in hand, Romano climbed back into the tail section, the air still thick with the stench of cordite and hydraulic fluid. In the quiet darkness, staring at the useless ring and bead sight, he found a solution. It came not as a dramatic revelation, but as a simple, powerful observation. Catching his own reflection in the curved plexiglass, he saw the blind spots behind his aircraft, the very angles a standard sight could never cover. He began to sketch, a new idea taking shape, a series of small, strategically angled mirrors that could give him the one thing he needed most, a way to finally see. Romano's mind grappled with the problem of a limited field of view. What if he angled mirrors to capture the incandescent paths of his own tracers, allowing him to walk his fire onto a target by watching reflections rather than squinting through inadequate iron sights? Then came the crucial leap, combining the mirrors with a simple reflector sight. A piece of etched glass would superimpose an aiming reticle over the target, while mirrors in the periphery tracked the glowing tracer patterns. This was no sophisticated gyroscopic system from a fighter plane. It was an ingenious, if unorthodox, assembly of reflective surfaces and improvised references. But it just might work. Romano toiled for 3 hours that night, sketching designs and measuring angles with a carpenter's protractor salvaged from the base machine shop. By dawn, he held detailed drawings for a mirror-assisted sight that required no power components and no factory modification. He also had a formidable problem. His design was a flagrant violation of Army Air Force's Technical Order ZO-120 EG-2, which prohibited unauthorized modifications to defensive armament. Installation without approval could lead to a court-martial. Romano decided he didn't care. He found his co-conspirator in the base sheet metal shop, Technical Sergeant Frank Kellerman, a 38-year-old mechanic from Detroit. Kellerman had honed his resourcefulness during the Depression in the Civilian Conservation Corps, repairing equipment with whatever he could scavenge. When Romano approached him on October 7th with the sketches, Kellerman studied them for less than 5 minutes. "This is illegal," he stated flatly. Romano nodded. "You're asking me to modify defensive armament without engineering approval, which violates about 6 different technical orders." "Yes, Sergeant." Kellerman looked up from the drawings. "When do you fly again?" "Tomorrow. Münster." A pause. "Then we'd better work fast." They began after midnight in a corner of the maintenance hangar, using scrap materials Kellerman had unofficially requisitioned. The components were a testament to their ingenuity, salvaged from the boneyard of damaged aircraft. Curved mirrors came from navigation equipment, plexiglass from shattered canopies, and aluminum brackets from written-off airframes. The system's crucial heart, the reflector sight, was carefully extracted from a wrecked P-47 Thunderbolt fighter. Kellerman re-engineered its nose-mounted brackets to fit the tail gunner's cramped position. The mirror system proved more challenging. To realize Romano's vision of 3 small convex mirrors, Kellerman fabricated adjustable brackets from sheet aluminum, using ball socket joints from an aircraft's control surfaces to give them the precise, steady articulation they needed. Under the cover of pre-dawn darkness, a clandestine modification takes place. At 0430 hours, the complete, untested assembly is installed in Sergeant Romano's B-17G, designated Knockout Dropper. While the flight line sleeps, the work is brutally pragmatic. Brackets are secured with standard aircraft bolts, mirrors affixed with simple safety wire. The reflector sight itself is mounted via a welded bracket that would have horrified its Boeing designers. No entry of this rogue engineering appears in the aircraft's maintenance logbook. At the dawn briefing for the mission to Münster, Romano tells no one. His pilot, Lieutenant James Holbrook, remains unaware, as do the group commander and the squadron armament officer. They launch at 0730 hours. Over Germany at 10:15, a Bf-109 begins its attack run from 6 o'clock low, closing fast. Romano swivels his guns, peering through the new sight. An illuminated reticle seems to float in space, superimposing itself over the approaching fighter. In his periphery, the mirrors provide a crucial, instantaneous understanding of his gun barrel's alignment. He fires a 3-second burst. The tracers, visible in the mirrors, arc behind the target. He adjusts, leading the fighter by the reticle's diameter, and fires again. This time, the streams of light and the enemy aircraft converge. The Bf-109's engine erupts, and the fighter rolls inverted, spiraling toward the earth in a plume of black smoke. Staring at his guns, then at the mirrors, Romano whispers into his oxygen mask, "It works." He lands at 1,340 hours with 1 confirmed kill, his first. The celebration is cut short after exactly 20 minutes. At 1400, during a routine post-flight inspection, Crew Chief Master Sergeant Donald Pierce discovers the unauthorized modifications. He immediately reports to the squadron armament officer, Captain Richard Voss, who arrives at the hard stand expressing barely contained fury. "Sergeant Romano," Voss began, his voice tight with military precision, "would you care to explain the unauthorized equipment installed in your gun position?" Romano's simple defense, "Sir, I install an improved sighting system," was met with disbelief. Voss's voice rose as he cited regulations, specifically Technical Order 01-20EG2, which explicitly prohibited such actions. "This isn't a hot rod in your backyard, Sergeant," he ceded, listing the dangers of compromising structural integrity and creating fire hazards. Romano's practical rebuttal, "Sir, the system works. I shot down," was cut short. "I don't care if you shot down the entire Luftwaffe," Voss retorted, jabbing a finger toward the tail. "That equipment is not Army Air Forces standard. It's not Boeing approved. Remove it immediately or I'll have you court-martialed." The order to dismantle Sergeant Romano's invention was swift and uncompromising. Despite a plea from his pilot, Lieutenant Holbrook, who had just witnessed the site secure its first kill, Captain Voss was resolute. The unauthorized modification would be removed. But the news had already escaped. Word of Romano's jury-rigged mirror site and its battlefield success ignited a firestorm of debate across the 91st Bomb Group. By evening mess, the enlisted men were sharply divided. Veteran gunners, hungry for any edge, peppered Romano with questions about installation, field of view, and its ability to withstand the punishing slipstream. For the officer corps, however, the invention represented a dangerous breach of military discipline. On October 11th, an emergency meeting of 14 officers was convened by a furious Captain Theodore Morrison, the group's assistant armament officer. He framed the issue not as one of innovation, but of insubordination, an enlisted man re-engineering a complex weapon system based on personal whim. The room erupted. Major William Calhoun, the operations officer, countered with the brutal pragmatism of combat, with tail gunners achieving a meager 8% hit rate. Any system that could improve those odds, even marginally, demanded investigation, not punishment. The argument between the two men, Morrison demanding data and controlled testing, Calhoun demanding immediate, real-world trials, devolved into a shouting match, pitting engineering protocol against appalling casualty rates. At 2,000 hours, the dispute reached the desk of Colonel Stanley Ray, the 53-year-old commanding officer of the 91st. A career officer and bomber pilot from the First World War, Ray possessed a reputation for both unwavering discipline and clear-eyed pragmatism. For 90 minutes, he listened in silence as both factions made their case. Finally, he spoke, cutting to the noise with a single, chilling question. "How many bombers did we lose last week?" When a stunned Captain Morrison answered, 17, Ray pressed him for the other side of the ledger. The number of enemy fighters shot down by their tail gunners. 3. Ray let the numbers hang in the air. 17 B-17s, representing 680 American airmen, traded for 3 German fighters. Looking directly at Morrison, he acknowledged the captain's valid concerns over regulations, but declared his own concern was for the 17 aircraft being lost every week. Turning to Romano, Colonel Ray delivered his verdict. The modification would stay. The sergeant would fly the next 3 missions, putting his invention to the ultimate test. On October 12, 1943, Sergeant Brimman Romano flew his 4th combat mission with his unauthorized sight system. The gun cameras aboard would be 17 recording every critical moment. The fate of his invention hung in the balance. That day, the 8th Air Force dispatched 236 bombers against German submarine construction facilities, and the Luftwaffe responded in force, scrambling 250 interceptors. At 11:23 hours over the German coast, the attacks began. A Focke-Wulf 190 Dove from 7 o'clock high. Romano tracked the fighter through his reflector sight, the illuminated reticle providing an immediate aim point while his peripheral vision caught the mirror images confirming his gun alignment. He fired a 4-second burst, the reflections of his own tracers allowing him to adjust his fire in real time. The FW-190's wing root erupted in flames, and the enemy fighter broke away, trailing smoke. 24 minutes later, a Messerschmitt Bf-109 initiated a classic tail attack from 6 o'clock level. Again, Romano centered the reticle, checked the mirror feedback, and fired. The 109's canopy shattered, and the fighter rolled inverted, plunging out of the sky. Upon his return to Bassingbourn, the gun camera footage presented irrefutable proof. Romano was credited with 2 confirmed kills and 1 probable, having expended a mere 380 rounds of ammunition, an astonishing 190 rounds per kill. This was a revolutionary improvement over the 2,800 rounds that conventional tail gunners averaged for a single victory. In the ensuing debriefing, even the skeptical Captain Morrison could not dispute the evidence. The mirror-reflector combination, he conceded, enabled a level of real-time fire correction that was impossible with standard ring and bead sights. "All right, it works," Morrison admitted, "but we need proper engineering drawings, standardized components, before we can approve group-wide implementation." When Colonel Ray asked for a timeline, Morrison estimated a minimum of 6 weeks to navigate the bureaucracy of 8th Air Force Headquarters. For Ray, who was losing men every day, 6 weeks was an eternity. He turned to technical Sergeant Kellerman. How many can you build per day? Kellerman, after a moment's thought, estimated for complete assemblies if they scavenge parts. Ray's decision was immediate and decisive. Start building. I want every tail gunner in this group equipped within 2 weeks. When Morrison objected, citing the lack of official authorization, the colonel cut him short. Captain, I'll handle the 8th Air Force. What followed was a remarkable feat of battlefield engineering, an improvised manufacturing operation that would have horrified any procurement bureaucrat. At Bassingbourn Airfield, Sergeant Kellerman and his maintenance team became master scavengers, turning the base into their personal supply depot. Reflector sights were stripped from written-off P-47 fighters, mirrors were cannibalized from damaged navigation equipment, and aluminum stock was requisitioned from supply warehouses. Within the maintenance hangar, they established a veritable production line, fabricating 4 complete mirror sight systems each day. By October 20th, 18 B-17s of the 91st Bomb Group carried Romano's modification into combat. The results were immediate and dramatic. On that same day, during a mission to Durin, tail gunners equipped with the new sights achieved 11 confirmed kills against 47 separate fighter attacks, a hit rate of 23.4%, nearly triple the previous average. The deadly pattern continued. November 3rd over Wilhelmshaven, a 23.5% hit rate. November 5th over Gelsenkirchen, 21.8%. For Luftwaffe pilots accustomed to attacking a B-17's rear with relative impunity, the tactical equation had been violently rewritten. German after-action reports suddenly noted the increased efficacy of American tail guns, recommending revised approach tactics. Luftwaffe ace Major Hans Joachim Jabs wrote in his diary, "The flying fortresses have become significantly more dangerous. Their tail gunners now demonstrate accuracy previously seen only in power turrets. Attacks from the rear quadrant now carry unacceptable risk." News of this startling success traveled quickly to 8th Air Force headquarters. On November 18th, Brigadier General Frederick Castle, commander of the 4th Bombardment Wing, arrived at Bassingbourn unannounced. He personally inspected Romano's tail position, examined the gun camera footage, and interviewed the sergeant. When asked how he knew it would work, Romano's reply was one of stark pragmatism. "I didn't, sir, but the old sights definitely didn't work. So I figured anything else might be an improvement." Castle authorized immediate implementation across the entire wing, ordering every B-17 to be modified within 30 days. Looking directly at Romano, he delivered profound acknowledgement. "Sergeant, you probably saved more American lives than you'll ever know." By December 1943, Romano's mirror reflector sight system was officially designated the unofficial modification, dubbed the Type 1, rapidly proliferated, with installations on over 200 B-17s across multiple bomb groups. This grassroots innovation did not go unnoticed. Formal engineering studies by the 8th Air Force Commission soon validated its effectiveness. At Boeing's Cheyenne Modification Center, designers incorporated Romano's core principles directly into the new, improved Cheyenne tail turret. Beginning in January 1944, production B-17GS began appearing with this new turret, featuring a factory-standard N8 reflector sight position almost precisely where Romano had mounted his salvaged P-47 sight. The impact was immediate and dramatic. Between October 1943 and March 1944, bomber groups equipped with these improved sighting systems saw losses from tail attacks plummet by a staggering 35%. This single innovation, initially deemed illegal and dangerous, translated directly into dozens of bombers and hundreds of airmen returning home. While his invention was saving lives across the 8th Air Force and even influencing designs of the B-24 Liberator, Sergeant Romano continued to fly. By February 1944, his personal tally stood an exceptional 7 confirmed kills. But on February 22nd, during the massive Big Week raids against German aircraft factories, his luck ran out. Over Leipzig, his bomber absorbed crippling flak damage. As hydraulic fluid and fuel sprayed through his compartment, Romano kept firing until his B-17 crash-landed in Belgium. The crew survived, but Romano would spend the remainder of the war in a German POW camp. He returned to the United States in May 1945, weighing just 127 pounds. The Army Air Forces awarded him the Distinguished Flying Cross, citing his innovative contribution to defensive armament, a carefully worded phrase that omitted the modification's illicit origins. Romano, however, sought no credit. He declined interviews and an invitation from Boeing, stating simply, "I just made what I needed to survive." He returned to Pittsburgh and worked as a machinist for 37 years, rarely speaking of the war. Yet his legacy was undeniable. The Cheyenne tail turret, incorporating the very principles he had pioneered, became standard equipment on the vast majority of the 8,680B 17GS produced, a silent, life-saving testament to one man's battlefield ingenuity. The tactical consequences of Romano's field modification were immediate and profound. The startling effectiveness of the improved tail gunnery forced the Luftwaffe to abandon its preferred 6 o'clock attack profile, shifting to perilous head-on assaults that dramatically increased their own casualty rates throughout 1944. Post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey quantified this impact with stark precision. B-17 groups equipped with the new sights suffer between 32 and 37% fewer losses from tail attacks. This single statistic translates into an estimated 840 aircraft and 8,400 crewmen who returned from missions they statistically should not have survived. The principles Romano pioneered would echo long after the war, influencing the design of sophisticated defensive systems on aircraft like the B-52 Stratofortress. Yet Romano's truest legacy is measured not in technology, but in lives. In 1983, at a reunion of a 91st Bomb Group at their old airfield in Bassingbourn, that legacy became tangible. Gerald Hammond, a former tail gunner, approached the now gray-haired, 60-year-old Romano. For 40 years, Hammond had kept a salvaged mirror bracket from his bomber. He presented it and said simply, "Because of you and those mirrors, I came home. My kids exist because you couldn't accept the sights we were given. Thank you." Romano, ever pragmatist, deflected the praise, replying, "You would have done the same thing. We all just wanted to survive." His humility, however, obscures a fundamental truth. Thousands of gunners face the same inadequate equipment and the same terrifying odds. Only one, a 22-year-old factory worker from Pittsburgh, refused to accept the status quo. Only he possessed the audacity to defy regulations, the ingenuity to improvise a solution, and the courage to risk a court-martial for his fellow airmen. When Michael Romano died in 2003, his obituary in the Pittsburgh Post-Gazette noted his service in a single line: World War II veteran, 8th Air Force. It made no mention of the lives saved by mirrors and salvage parts, nor that his illicit modification became standard issue. It did not tell the story of a young sergeant who, while generals debated protocols, quietly solved a fatal problem they could not. His life stands as a powerful testament that the greatest innovations often arise not from permission, but from conviction that human lives matter more than any rule.